Welcome to this week's Peep Show episode of Bare Naked Bravery. My name is Emily Ann Peterson, and I'm a singer-songwriter, creative consultant, and an author of the book Bare Naked Bravery, How to Be Creatively Courageous, which is available on Amazon in all 4 formats. So audiobook, paperback, hardback, Kindle, all that good stuff. I've been getting some really good feedback from that, and if you've read it and you have some feedback to offer, good or bad, I would love to hear it. Today, we are talking about not just how to, but also the ramifications of choosing to do self-promotion differently. Last week, I announced that we were going to do a free workshop coming up on how to flow with life without being a victim. And someone actually requested that I veer into self-promotion instead with this month's subject of power of choice. Mainly just because it's a subject that a lot of creatives deal with. I know I get a lot of questions about it from you guys. And so I wanted to meet those needs for one, but I also realized that I would prefer to be super, super, super helpful in a really applicable way. And sometimes I tend to get really deep and heady and philosophical about things. And sometimes that's not as helpful as just actually applying it right away. So let's apply it right away. Today, like I said, we're talking about self-promotion and what happens when you choose to do self-promotion differently. So I've kind of written down a couple of different scenarios that I have personally gone about with my self-promotion in a different kind of way. So the first one is live networking. And I know I've mentioned this in an episode previous about, it's okay to be different when you are doing networking, when you're doing self-promotion. Specifically, I think I've used this example possibly in last week's episode, actually. But it's a good one, and it's a really applicable concept that if you are an introvert and you are going into a live networking scenario, or you're at a conference or something, just because there is a status quo of needing to go around and introduce yourself to everyone in the room or as many people as possible, that does not mean that it is the right or appropriate choice for you in that scenario, in that situation. Personally, I'm an INFJ. I am an introvert. I'm intuitive. I feel things and I also judge things, which means that I put labels on things, and oftentimes I put labels on myself. Hence me putting a label on myself in terms of Myers-Briggs profiling. But I digress. Basically, what that means in a live networking scenario is that it is not my super uber forte to go around and just be the absolute life of the party. I've been to many a Christmas party where I've been in the room with 35 people and talked to 2 of them in depth. And I'm, in doing some intuitive sensing to make sure that that's an appropriate thing for the other person, for me to be sitting here eating Christmas cookies and talking about really in-depth, life-changing kind of things. But that's just me and my personality. I love going deep really fast with people. I really hate chit-chat. Really hate it. I can do it, but there's only so much of it that I can do in a year. I have a yearly quota that I can meet and cannot surpass. So when it comes to live networking, I choose to do self-promotion differently. I choose to take my time, go a little bit slower, and use my intuition to tell me who I should speak to rather than just to have a sensory overload experience and try to remember as many names as possible. The ramifications of that are that I don't have a lot of connections. I do have a lot of connections relatively in comparison to people who don't do self-promotion versus people who do, but I don't have as many connections as somebody who is not as introverted as I am. And so the quantity of my networking connections is not as high, but the quality of my networking connections is super high. 2 years ago, I attended a conference, befriended like one person in line to something. We were waiting for something and we just started chatting. The talk, we were discussing probably like the temperature of the coffee that they were serving or something silly like that. It was chit chat, right? But I was not expecting that chit chat was going to go as deep as it did, as fast as it did. And so now I have a relationship with this person, where we connect and talk with each other via text about our careers and our the directions that we're going with our businesses. And it's so wonderful to have those kinds of connections that are really deep and really meaningful, right? They're full of intention and meaning, and that's right up my alley. One of the things to keep in mind, or that I have to keep in mind when I am doing that kind of different networking in an in-person kind of way, is that I want to make sure that the other person I'm speaking to doesn't mind going as deep or doesn't mind spending like 15 minutes chatting with me about something really intentional. For the most part, people who are at networking events are there to be intentional about networking. And so when you present yourself as an option to do that with, usually everyone's really game for it. So I would say that, when you are doing self-promotion differently, it can be really powerful, especially if you are utilizing your own strengths as a person and as a human. If you are just such a server and you really love to help people, then maybe your prime place of networking is going to be helping set up and tear down for a networking event so that you can actually have your hands full and you can, if something gets awkward, you can go stack some chairs or something. And that has worked really well for some of my clients to make sure they have something to do with their hands. Because that's always so awkward. If you're standing there and you don't have pockets or a purse to like hang on to, then like, what are you supposed to do with your hands? And especially what are you supposed to do with your hands when you're trying to like fiddle with them and you're trying not to look nervous or all of those things. Those are all pieces of trying to do self-promotion a little bit differently. So like if you need to have something to fiddle with your hands, then, oh my gosh, just hold a pen in your hand for the whole conference so that you can just like twirl it around. That's completely and totally fine. But again, this starts with vulnerability. This starts with honesty. Get honest with who you are and what you are and how you want to do the self-promotion differently. And that's going to get you a long way. Because once you start with what you have, then you can really analyze how that fits into what everyone else has or what the rest of the world is expecting of you. Okay, so that's live networking. When it comes to online networking or online self-promotion, I kind of do a similar thing. Like, I'm not the kind of person that jumps into Facebook groups all day, every day, just because I try not to be on Facebook all the time. But it does mean that when I am on Facebook or when I am on social media, on Instagram, I'm there for a purpose. I'm trying to communicate something really intentional. What that does is it attracts people who are like-minded. They appreciate that intentionality. They appreciate that extra layer of meaning that I offer. Even on my personal profile page, I try to keep it really no fluff. Or if there is fluff, it's just for the sake of being really hilarious and really fun. So making sure that my touch points or my communication that I offer with people is really potent, that's a high priority for me. So potency is a priority for me. The other thing that I do a little bit differently just as a business owner is that I understand how powerful referrals and testimonials are. So I'm constantly asking for people who have without prompting, given awesome feedback, I turn that back around and I say, that is so wonderful for you to tell. Thank you for telling me this. It would do me such an honor if you would copy and paste what you just put in that email and put it in an Amazon review or put it on an iTunes review or do a video testimonial about how that client session consulting, the creative consulting that I do, give me a video testimonial because that's really, really powerful. And I know not a lot of people are doing that. They're not hearing the feedback and saying, thank you. There's more that can be done when you get that kind of positive feedback. And even if you get some negative feedback, this is like part of wanting, part of boundaries. Some people have a hard time hearing that negative feedback. But personally, I really learn a lot about that negative feedback. And so rather than just saying, I'm sorry you felt that way, I usually follow it up and say, I'm sorry you felt that way. What kind of experience would have made it better? Or how could you see me improving in that area? And I've actually gotten a lot of really wonderful ideas from people just by being open to receiving some different kind of news. And I get better ideas. I get better at what I do, but that person who might have had a difficult experience or possibly like their expectations weren't met for whatever reason, they get to walk away having felt heard and like their experience was understood. And that's really important for me, is I want to make sure that everyone who comes in contact with me feels understood and feels like they can get what they want out of our relationship, even still with both of us having our boundaries set in place. The mutual benefit is really important to me. That also ties over into that live networking stuff. I want to make sure that when I am doing self-promotion differently, that there is still a mutual benefit happening. It's not just me spewing self-promotion. Hey, look at me. Hey, look at me. It's being helpful and it's being intentional and it's providing people a turning point from what they are to what they desire to be and get and do and achieve. So if this little snippet of a little taste of self-promotion suggestions is powerful for you, then I recommend that you RSVP to the next free masterclass that I'm giving later this month on April 14th. I am talking all about self-promotion and how to overcome the anxiety around it. These classes are not always live, so this class will be available later as a replay, but if you want to get in and jump in on the live coaching bit that I do towards the end or consulting, then we will be applying these kinds of self-promotion concepts to some folks in the hot seat. So basically, we'll have some volunteers and we'll workshop some of your situations and your experiences with self-promotion anxiety. I really want to provide 3 of my favorite skills for overcoming self-promotion anxiety, and I want to apply those skills in really practical ways, similar to some of these explanations that I did today, but in a really personal kind of way. So you are invited to come to this free masterclass on April 14th. Just go to emilyannpeterson.com/workshops, and we'll be talking all about it. This is the stuff that for creatives, especially creative visionaries who want to do big, bold things, networking and self-promotion is sometimes it's just a tough, necessary pill to swallow. And if you don't know how to swallow this pill, then it'll make you gag and then you won't want to do the thing you actually are here to do. My goal with this class is to inform and teach you guys some easier ways to accomplish some of the stuff in business and in life that is just part of being a creative and part of being a visionary and doing brave and wonderful big things in the world. That's really important. Our bravery is so needed in the rest of the world There are people who are just waiting for you to speak up and show up and do the thing that you're here to do. And if self-promotion is the only thing between you and them, then I really, really want to help you overcome some of those struggles. And it's not it's not a miracle pill. You're not going to like leave this class and have everything be perfect. However, I want you to walk away with some revelations and feeling empowered to challenge the status quo or your status quo of what it means to do self-promotion. Because when we choose to do self-promotion differently, the benefit of that is that people who are receiving this self-promotion, they also receive you a little bit differently. Most of the time in a much better way than if you were just shoving business cards in people's faces. It's really powerful to just come from self-promotion as a servant, as a helper, and still have self-worth attached to that, which is part of what we're going to be talking about on the 14th, is how to combine your self-worth with your servanthood mindset so that you can be really helpful and connect with people in a really, really concise and powerful kind of way. So I think we're going to be starting back up the Ask Emily Ann live streams as well. So if you have some questions to ask me, go ahead and either email them to me or you can DM me on Instagram, and I would be glad to add them to one of our live streams coming up. In the meantime, please go and sign up for the Overcoming Self-Promotion Anxiety Workshop on April 14th. We would love to see you there. And yes, there will be a replay available. I get to do this self-promotion stuff this week because I'm going up to Nashville to go hang out with a couple songwriter friends, most of whom I don't know yet, which is kind of terrifying for me. But here's one of the wonderful things that I've noticed about doing self-promotion differently. So rather than going to a songwriting conference and just like shaking a bunch of hands, one of the best ways that I've learned is to have a third something in the room. So when I was living with my grandfather last year and there was just, a bunch of TV shows on, and it was TV shows I didn't want to be watching. And there wasn't a lot to connect with my grandfather with, or on or about. And so I had already had in my mind that I wanted to adopt a dog. And so we did it. We adopted the dog. And what I found was that having that third something in the room gave my grandfather and I a method of communicating and connecting together. So similarly, in a networking environment, by networking a little bit differently, I get to work on my craft. The craft is that third thing. The songwriting is the third thing. So going to these songwriting critique circles and songwriter circles, it really gives us a common ground, but we're also able to talk about a subject that's like a safe subject and to be interested and cheer each other on in that way. It's not as intense because we're just looking at the same thing rather than looking at each other directly, if that makes sense. So I would encourage you to apply some of these techniques to your self-promotion if you are in a self-promotion environment. If you are not, then I encourage you to apply some of these similar techniques to your personal bravery. So if you aren't trying to be out there and introducing yourself and networking, then I encourage you to do something like, if you're trying to be brave in your relationships, what's that third thing that could be in the room that would allow you and the other person to relax a little bit and to connect a little bit deeper? In the case of the live networking events, when you go to a party, if you know that you just love being in the kitchen and helping out, but that it's a little bit hard to make real connections with people, maybe you can try to venture out to go help at, for example, just at the punch table so that you're in the midst of other people rather than just hiding in the kitchen. And this is just if you are trying to stretch yourself, right? If you feel like you're in a season of life where you just need to be comfortable, then by all means, stay in the kitchen, because I've had some really great conversations in the kitchen too. So all of this to say that we really do need your bravery, especially when we're connecting with each other as humans. That is just so, so, so important, especially in today's day and age. We really need to connect with each other because we really need each other's bravery. And it's really powerful to acknowledge that bravery in each other as well. Okay, so I am going to call it a night, call it a day, and in the meantime, I want you to know, so next week, we've got a really exciting guest. Karen Stevens is going to be back for her sequel interview. She sent me an email the other day with a couple questions about self-promotion stuff and about putting yourself out there. And I said, Karen, these are such great questions. Let's turn this into an episode. And yes, I'm going to answer them. So be looking for Karen Stevens' episode next week. So exciting. I love her and I love all of her work and I love everything she does. So it's such an honor to have her back on the show. In the meantime, please know that we need your bare naked bravery. We need your vulnerability. We need your improvisation, and we need your imagination as well. Oh, and hey, if you haven't left a review of the show in iTunes, that is so, so powerful. We haven't gotten any reviews in a while, and I want to make sure that the show is visible and still being able to be found at the top of the charts for the subjects that we're speaking about. So if you are leaving a review is really, really, really helpful for us. Even more than that, it's really helpful for you to share this podcast with your friends. It's just a really great way to spread the bravery and make sure that these important topics are being covered and being answered. Questions are being answered for people who have them. That's what we're here for. That's what I'm here for. Okay, you guys have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you in our Facebook group.